What are the three quintessential 80s movies? I'm sure there'll be varying answers. Girls may swoon over 16 Candles or Pretty in Pink. Dudes may belch out Top Gun or Commando. People in their 30s and 40s may remember The Breakfast Club and Fast Times at Richmond High fondly. Some may geek out for Blade Runner or Revenge of the Nerds. Film aficionados will swear by Raging Bull or Do the Right Thing. Haters of anything American may pledge their allegiance to Cinema Paradiso or Das Boot. Warmongers may get their shits and giggles through Platoon and Glory. And manic depressives may have watched Airplane and Terms of Endearment concurrently just a few too many times. But I think of all the 80s films, the three that will be mentioned most often are Ferris Bueller's Day Off, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and Back to the Future. Perhaps that list isn't entirely accurate, but the point I'm trying to get across to you is that Back to the Future was a big fucking deal when released in 1985. There's just no way to put it delicately. It had a relatively modest opening, but word of mouth caught on, and people started seeing the film in droves and kept rewatching it, allowing for the film to be ranked number one at the box office for 11 weeks. Michael J. Fox was even bigger than Justin Bieber is today, and the DeLorean DMC-12 became everyone's dream car. So if you're going to use a movie IP from the 80s to develop an adventure game, there aren't too many bigger than Back to the Futures. A lot of people have seen the films. A lot of people will have certain expectations of the game. And I think for the most part, Telltale Games has met them. The game takes place shortly after the conclusion of the third film, and its story is familiar. Marty McFly travels through time to set things straight. In this episode, Emmett Brown, or Doc as he's affectionately called by Marty McFly, has time traveled, destination and time unknown, and you, as Marty McFly, need to retrieve him. I'm not going to give any further details regarding the story, but the story is very much serviceable, quite good in fact. But what I want to emphasize is that Back to the Future the game feels very much Back to the Future-esque. It feels like it belongs in that universe, and some of that has to do with a few key people involved in the films reprising their roles, like Christopher Lloyd as Emmett Brown and co-writer and co-producer Bob Gale acting as story consultant. But it's mostly because the guys at Telltale Games have done their homework. It seems obvious to me that they are big fans of the films, and they've taken the time to correlate the larger themes of the films with the game and get minute details right. From the Hill Valley setting to the voice acting, the game does a believable job of recreating the Back to the Future universe, even as Christopher Lloyd is obviously now 147 years old, and he sounds it with his old man phlegm-clogged voice. The two staples of point-and-click adventure games are puzzles and story. The story in the first episode of Back to the Future the game is, as I mentioned earlier, quite good. At the very least, it's entertaining to see all the characters from that universe in various stages of their lives, with, as in the film, some of the characters being represented by their ancestors and their various exploits. Particularly enjoyable is Doc, who is his usual eccentric, almost maniacal self. You get to meet a younger version of him, which is an absolute hoot, and the writing really shines through these characters. Some new characters are introduced, such as Edna Strickland, who's a cranky and prudish sister of Principal Strickland from the films, and they are all interesting to listen to and interact with. Though the plot is somewhat simplistic, there is a wealth of details within that are worth exploring. One thing that I always appreciated about the films is that they do a great job of piquing my curiosity on what is going to happen next, and it's very much true of the game. The game starts off with an interactive replay of the first film in the series, but it quickly takes off in its own direction, and the game does a very good job of telling an original tale and keeping things interesting. There's good incentive to find out what happens next. What happened to Doc? Where did he go? How do I find out? What's going to happen once I find him? How do I help him out? There's intrigue weaved into the story, and I for one wanted to find out how everything's going to turn out. And all this would be great if this were a film or interactive movie, but it's not, it's a game. The puzzles in the game are either too easy or entirely nonsensical. They're either the type in which you simply click an inventory item on a character, or the type in which you feed a dog hot dogs, causing it to poop, which you pick up and place in a paper bag, which you light on fire and leave in front of someone's house and ring the bell so that someone comes running to trample the fire out, and upon realizing that he's got poop on his shoe, throws it away which you pick up and wear to a party so that the smell of the poop causes everyone to clear the room, giving you free access to a computer from which you retrieve some vital data. The puzzles suck. And that doesn't entirely make the game unpleasant to play, but the story does drive the game forward quite a bit, and following the story is enjoyable in and of itself. But it made me wonder if I'm playing an interactive movie or a game. I mean, why not just replace the puzzles with continue icons which you left click to move the plot along? Why bother even having puzzles if they're going to suck? A lot of people seem to have enjoyed a particular puzzle in which you do one of 4 things that Doc tells you to do. Release a valve to set off steam, turn this thingy to generate electricity, and so forth. It's kind of cleverly done. The young Doc is arguing with his dad. Apparently his dad doesn't like his son dabbling in science and prefers that he concentrate on law, as he himself is a judge. So they're arguing about that, but Doc needs you to help him out with this thing he's invented, and it's time crucial, meaning that it must be done now. But of course, he can't do it because he's busy arguing with his dad, so he gives you clues while he's arguing. If he says something like, "Dad, you're suffocating me with all this pressure to study law," then you release the valve to let off steam, and so forth. Now, I do think this is clever. I think that the writing is solid, and it's amusing to listen to Doc and his dad argue, but the puzzle is crap. It may as well have been buttons 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you're tasked to press whichever number Doc tells you to press. If he tells you to press button 4, you press button 4. It's like whack-a-mole for the dim-witted. The actual gameplay portion of the game isn't all that great. That's not to say that the game isn't entirely devoid of good puzzles. There are few highlights, like when you're in Edna Strickland's house to try and find out exactly which date Doc is stuck in. But they are far and few between, and too many of them are either too simple or absolutely nonsensical. A lot of puzzles are trial and error. Click an inventory item on a person and hope that works. Another problem with the game is that it doesn't quite capture the action-adventure spirit of the films, which is kind of a weird thing to say about an adventure game. What I mean is, there's a lot of action in the films, the kind that you'd expect in an adventure film. Marty running around frantically, weaving his skateboard in and out of traffic, getting into scuffles, and so forth. The game only has one sequence towards the end that captures the action-adventure feel of the films. The rest of the game is disappointingly slow-paced. And I've never complained about the lack of point-and-click controls that Telltale Games eschewed since Sam & Max Season 2, but I have some serious beef with it in this game. The town map is semi-3-dimensional, meaning that it's mainly 2-dimensional, except that the available path allows for occasional turns. So basically, you walk to the end of a line, and you make a right, and continue until the end of that line, and then make another right till the end of that line, forming a 3-sided squarish map. There was a moment in which I wasn't entirely sure what I was supposed to do because all the pixel hunting didn't reveal anything. So I used the handy clue system to tell me what my next move is supposed to be, and it told me that I'm supposed to go to the prison located across the street from the courthouse. Unfortunately, it was impossible to tell how to go across the street, partly because there's no way to change the camera angle so that I can actually see across the street, but mostly because the controls were quite stiff and it was hard to tell where I could go and where I couldn't without a lot of trial and error. I say, either make the map fully 3-dimensional and allow for change in camera angles, or allow for point and click controls. I did eventually find the prison, but it was an unnecessarily frustrating ordeal. As simplistic and nonsensical as the puzzles are, I still say that I did kind of enjoy the game as a whole, mainly because the story that drives the game forward is enjoyable, and revisiting one of my favorite childhood movies and some of the more interesting characters is a blast. But this is a game. The gameplay element in point-and-click adventure games is the puzzle, and the puzzles in this game are lackluster. What could have been an absolute wonderful journey revisiting the Back to the Future franchise turned out to be somewhat of a letdown.